Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight is a really exciting night because it's the first time that Office Hours Live is going to be not just me, but also another career expert. And tonight we are getting to hear from one of my very good friends, Luke Henderson. And I'm just going to bring him in right now and introduce him. Hi,
Hello.
Luke.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for
Really
having me.
appreciate it.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
as I was saying, Luke is one of my very good friends and also is a student advisor for the largest co op program in the world. So, I thought it was one of the largest in one of the leading co op programs in North America, but it's the largest in the world. So, and you've been doing this job for several years now,
Yep, coming
right?
up on 9 years. 9 years this November. Yeah.
9 years. Wow. So you've learned a lot along the way.
Yes.
And we're really looking forward to having you share your insights with people tuning in tonight. 9 years worth of insights, so that's great. And Yeah, I think you have such a cool job. I know I've been quite jealous of your job at times. The amount of travel that you get to do. You're covering um, all of Eastern North America, right? Is your territory?
Yeah. Yep. Pretty
Okay.
much. Yeah.
So when you're traveling, you get to visit students um, all over North America with some of the leading employers across North America. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the leading employers, some of the leading research institutions, academic institutions as well in the world.
Fantastic. And
Boston,
yeah,
Boston being a big hub of mine, their return. So,
that's right.
well,
Boston.
not
Yeah.
now, but maybe in a couple terms from now.
Yes, yes. COVID has unfortunately thrown a bit of a wrench into all of our travel plans and employment plans, actually. And I think that's why we're really going to, you're really going to give a lot of peace of mind to the people that are tuning in tonight. Because I think, and you can speak to this more, uh, students, particularly, I think, have been really hit hard in terms of future plans due to COVID. So, how would you say, like, the co-op landscape or internship landscape or just employment in general for the younger folks, how has it really changed with COVID?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly it's taken a hit, like it has for everybody. One of the challenges for employers has been onboarding people remotely, and specifically students. So that's definitely been a challenge in the early days of the pandemic, and now that we're 6 months in or whatever, starting to see just maybe anecdotally a little bit, but definitely starting to see more jobs, more opportunities. Seeing these employers that didn't typically weren't set up for the remote, for the remote systems and so forth, are now kind of getting comfortable with it, and realizing that students and young new employees really fill an important gap in their organization, and they're kind of getting over those kind of um, um, not misconceptions but hesitations that many of them have been feeling, and bringing them on and making a go of it, and being quite successful so far from what
That's
I've seen.
That's great to hear. So what was like the biggest hurdle that most employers had to overcome in order to onboard these interns and co-op students?
It was a couple of things. Getting them hardware. I mean,
Mm,
obviously, students now, everybody's got a laptop and you're connected to the internet. But something, depending on the industry, sometimes you need secure access. You need a secure system. So getting that to them, particularly within the public sector, the federal government, provincial government in particular, and for some of the smaller private sector companies as well. And it's just, and there's a lot goes into hosting a co-op or an
mm.
intern. There's the whole idea of, you're supporting the student. It's a learning experience for both parties, and can me as the employer really supports the student when I've never met them in person. Expecting them to integrate this, young 18 to 24-year-old. Can they integrate with a team remotely? Right. Having maybe they've never even set foot in an office. So how do I make this work? And also, you want it to work for me, the employer, but you also for the student that you're bringing in, of course, too.
For sure.
So that was kind of some of the bigger challenges.
It's certainly not easy for anyone really in the employee side or employer side. There's a lot of new learning for everybody, as you said. Mm-hmm. So what have you seen in terms of things that co-op students have done that have really ensured their success in this new normal of working remotely for their co-ops?
Yeah, well, so certainly, I mean, the generation that are going up, coming into universities now, or coming out of universities now, very tech savvy.
Right.
They're online. Talking in sweeping generalizations. They're online a lot.
Right.
They're already interconnected with the social media. And everything else. So from the students I've interacted with. They've really it's business as usual. And for the students, obviously most of them want the in-person experience and to interact more, in person with their colleagues. But they've lived their life online more or less, and they're just using that to their advantage and just adapting it to the professional environments and really kind of just running with it.
That's great. Yeah, it's amazing how tech savvy the younger generations are. And I know, like, for us, when we were job searching back in that time, it was a very different world. Mm-hmm. And so, like, bringing it back to kind of the more traditional aspects of job searching, resumes, which oddly haven't gone anywhere. Just moved from physical paper to totally digital. What are some of the kind of missteps you see co-op students or undergrads or Gen Z making in their resumes?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the students that I work with for resume, when I'm working with them on their resumes, they tend to be more of the junior students. So I work with students of all levels, but that's the vast majority. When they're new, some of them are 18 years old and 4 months out of high school. They may have never had a part-time job, or they've worked at the fast food chain or whatever. But so some of the glaring mistakes that I see is kind of overvaluing MS Office. And what I mean by that is that's high on their skills summary, and using that as as a key selling point. Granted, in their first co-op job or first internship, they're probably going to be using a lot of Excel and PowerPoint and everything else, and of course everybody uses Outlook and all that stuff. But and you talk to any employer, and they're like, I don't know why these students put MS Office on here. I just assume they're like miles ahead of me. So,
right.
And employers are already assuming you're rock stars with the MS Office. And, it's not a major selling point on your resume.
Right.
So of course you should highlight it if it asks for in the job description. But I would say that's a big one. And another common misstep that I see all the time is say putting in those generic soft skill lines, keen attention to detail, and then the resume is riddled with grammar and formatting errors. Mm-hmm. And that's as an employer reading that, or a recruiter, that's obviously a huge red flag for that. So I usually have my students just remove that, just because if it's not there and you make those little mistakes, it could be overlooked, but once you make that statement, then the employer's thinking, well, they can't, if they're not paying attention on their resume, what are they going to do when I'm paying them? And they're responsible for this, that, and the other thing.
For sure. And to that point, I have heard from some recruiters who I won't name that some of them, when they see attention to detail on a resume, they scrutinize that resume even more heavily because, oh, you're claiming attention to detail. Well, then you should have a perfect, grammatically perfect spelling, no error resume. So, yeah, you got to be really careful.
Exactly. It's very easy to prove right there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's so interesting about the overemphasis of MS Office, because that's what I see in my work too as well, is almost every resume that someone's kind of DIY'd, Office is going to show up in some way, shape, or form. And that's as you were saying, that's really a prerequisite. So the only thing that I would probably or consider really emphasizing is like if they're super good at Excel, like VLOOKUPs and all whatever the fancy stuff, macros. But I think it's funny, especially because some of the students that you work with are very technical, like engineering folks, right? And robotics too, I think, right? Yeah. So for them to put MS Office, I find quite funny.
Yeah. And sometimes, and I always get a little chuckle when it's like up a little higher, and then they have like their Python, Racket, SQL, or whatever other programming language. Like these are put those up a little bit higher.
These are much more important.
These are much more unique.
Man. And so there's the resume side of things. LinkedIn has always been an interesting topic for me when I'm talking to students, which isn't very often because I don't specialize in working with students, but it seems that there was a long period of time that students had difficulty getting on the LinkedIn train. Like that was just my perception. Maybe I'm wrong, but what have you seen in your work in terms of students and how they approach LinkedIn?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like even within the last year, for sure, I've seen a market shift in students getting into LinkedIn. It's being pushed at the academic level in their courses, even before they're applying to their first co-op job or internship. So I'm seeing almost across the board now, pretty consistently, everybody's on LinkedIn, though there's still the oddball that doesn't do that yet. But yeah, as little as within a year or two ago, there was statistics not too long ago. It was like 11% of students were on LinkedIn.
That's it?
At the time, 11%, and this was like a couple of years ago. Certainly 11% within our institution, but that seemed to be across the board. So definitely seeing they're on, at least on it. Just in my conversations with a lot of students, they're not really sold on the value of it. They know they need it, but they're haven't quite understood or seen where the value is in LinkedIn quite yet, and that could be partly due to where they are in their early on in their career. They're just building their network, what have you. But yeah, it's one of those things that I'm regularly selling on my business. I think LinkedIn should start paying me some money because getting all these people to sign up.
Anyone on LinkedIn, anyone on the live tonight from LinkedIn, take note. So I wonder, like, if some of the resistance is also because students or the younger folk, like Gen Z, they're used to like the Snapchat, the TikTok, stuff that I never got on, and I'm saying with and that shows how old I am. But, so I wonder if it's hard for them to separate fun social media from professional social media.
Yeah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think that's a big part of it.
But it's interesting though that you're noting that they may not be sold on the value of it, and so maybe that's something that LinkedIn should really be taking note of themselves.
Yeah, and as we well know, networking and LinkedIn, it's a long-term game, and these students are generally used to the TikToks, as you say. It's fast, it's immediate, it's quick, it's now. But you got to play a long game here.
For sure.
That's where the sell is.
Yeah, totally agree. So speaking of networking, so someone commented on another one of my videos that they felt that as a new grad or as a student that they could never break into their target employer without a connection to someone on the inside. So what's your advice for students or the younger folk who are new to networking, or they want to break into or meet someone where they know no one? Like, what do you usually advise them to do?
Yeah, usually after you've kind of, I usually have my students send out a little boilerplate message to everybody they know, family and friends, because, pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, Auntie Anne is, at our spin class, and you just happen to send a note that I'm looking for this, and here's my resume. If you're talking to anybody and she's talking to somebody on the bike next door who's in the industry that you want to be in, and that turns into a link, a connection. Beyond that, I advise my students to get on LinkedIn, use their advanced filters to look at institution. They have the institution or educational institution filter there. Put in your university. Find alumni. When you find an alumni, that's who you're going after. Alumni, they've been through this, especially if you're talking co-op. That's the biggest source of new jobs for our institution it tends to be through alumni, our alumni network. So yeah, I'd say, they may not be at the company you're after right yet, but you build up to that, and as you build your network, you can get referrals and kind of you start branching out, and hopefully you'll get a connection there. But yes, definitely start with alumni of your institution. They'll be generally more than willing to at least take your call and hopefully get you started.
That's an excellent point, and that goes across the board, is to start with alumni. That's what I also advise my clients, and they're not, most of them are well into their careers or even nearing retirement, and always start with alumni. You instantly have something in common. And that's great to hear that most of the opportunities are originating from alumni. So that also speaks to the strength of the alumni network at your university. So that's excellent. Great. So I just want to take a moment to tell everybody on the broadcast to feel free to include your questions for Luke in the chat, and we will certainly circle back to them. I have a lot of questions still remaining for you, Luke. And so when we were talking about resumes, we were talking about MS Office being overly emphasized, potentially useless skills being overly emphasized. Yeah. But where do you maybe see a gap in kind of soft skill strengths that is kind of holding students back from really getting up to speed quickly once they do step into a co-op job? Like, what should they be working on from a soft skill perspective?
Yeah, I mean, certainly communication, both oral and written, is extremely important. I think across anywhere. As you mentioned, the institution with, and you can find out if you Google me, is, it's very, very technical. So we have the entire range. We have arts and environments and everything else, but high achievers, very, very, very bright student body that I work with. Kind of shocking how smart a lot of these kids are. Most of these kids are, and I say kids. I know they're young adults, but
I know.
I'm to that age. I can call them kids now, I think. Yeah. So communication, oral and written. I hear like all the time from employers that when they're bringing in the students, they got into this university or another institution, they have the technical chops, and they're going to have to learn the individual, the unique process within company X. and employers, we can teach them that. We know that they can learn the technical skills, but it takes a lot more time and effort to build soft skills. And if I have to spend, me, a employer, if I have to spend time with, coaching this student how to write a professional email, or, how to, interact with the team, that's a big concern for me as the employer. So working on that, and that's, you don't obviously don't have to get a paying job or a part-time job to build your soft skills. It could be through volunteering. It could be you set up a book club and discussions, and kind of lead these things. There's lots of ways that you can kind of build and hone those skills, or you're part of the Toastmasters or whatever, those kind of things. It doesn't have to be a paid work experience to build your soft skills, of course. So that would be the thing. And as related to that is being a team player and being able to get along with other people, because regardless of your job, you're going to be in a team working with other people, unless you're running your own business and getting it off the ground and they're coding by yourself in the basement. Those are very few. There are very few of those. But at some point, your business is going to grow, and you're going to need to talk to investors.
That's right.
So,
yep.
You're always going to need to be interacting with people. So, kind of honing and building on your people skills and communication and working with others, and just kind of rolling with different characters and stuff, and while staying professional. That's kind of really the main important soft skills that I see that
for sure
employers want from students coming in. For sure.
All great points. And to your point, like no one is going to be forever in a basement coding on their own. And everybody technically has like a customer. Like your customer could be, a straight client, like you could be in a client-facing position, or you could have an internal stakeholder, someone you're building a product for. You always have someone that you have to engage with, basically. Yeah. So soft skills, very important. We have a question. I think there's a question. Zubair, did you have a question? Sorry, Luke. Zubair, did you have a question that you were asking? Oh, yes, sorry. We do have a question here. My mistake, I missed it. So let's just take it now, since it's related to what we were chatting about. So Zubair's asking, what would be your advice for current students with work experience looking for a transition into a new field? Interesting. Okay, yeah. What do you think about that?
Okay, for current students with work experience looking for transition into a new field. Well, certainly, ideally, you'll be able to talk to some people that are in that field. So hopefully through your network, or through from your peers. Like even if you mentioned as a current student, some of your professors or academic advisors for that program, career advisors, if you have them at your school. There's a lot on LinkedIn. There's lots of professional groups. So I would suggest, hopping on to one of those professional groups that fit, the new field you're after, and, throwing the question out there to all the professionals who are in there, get their advice on, what are some of the main skills? What should I be looking for? What are the opportunities look like in the field? And just kind of picking their collective brain, and you'll get people responding to you for sure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's surprising. Like, I think we all feel like, I don't have anything to really offer. I'm trying to ask a question. I'm trying to learn. And I think we all feel a bit awkward about reaching out to people kind of cold. But it is surprising how many people will want to help a stranger, really.
Yeah. And people, when you're asking people about their experience and how they got to where they are and any advice they have, people generally like to talk about themselves and how they got there. So, and when you're talking about transition, as just to our previous points on soft skills, of course are transferable. So you're not remember, you're not starting from scratch. Maybe having some new technical things that you're learning or adapting to, but you definitely have base. So you're not a total newbie in any.
That's right. Yeah. So actually, in terms of asking people questions, does the term like informational interview come up a lot with your students?
Yeah. Usually it's me saying that, but 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 usually when I explain it or I mention it, they tend to it's fairly self-explanatory. Sometimes I have to just kind of pull them back a bit. Like, so I should call them up and see if they have opportunities. So, well, ideally, no. Start build a relationship. First, this is just information. You're just information gathering. You're kind of start building that relationship, building that connection. Hopefully, getting some referrals to branch out from there. And then you get to the point down the road. Like, hey, we talked recently, a couple months ago. Just checking in. Really interested in what you're doing in your company, and maybe go from there about asking for opportunities.
I think that's great advice, not just for co-op and internship students, but everybody that's job searching, is using those informational interviews, as you say, for information gathering, hence the name Informational. Not just being like, hey, do you have any jobs? And really the conversation is going to evolve naturally that direction if they are hiring for something that you can fulfill for them. So.
Yeah, and sometimes they see through it pretty quickly, and they know what you're. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know what you're after generally, but that's okay too. If they want to cut to the chase, that's all right. There, but you're still having that conversation, and some of those conversations that I've had personally, they cut through. You're looking for something. I don't have anything here, but glad you're interested. I think you should talk to this person, and referrals from there. So it's all about, and going back to one of your earlier points, it's the networking is about the long game, right? And so awesome. So speaking about not informational interviews now, but interviews, what are some mistakes that you see the younger generation making in interviews? So some of the big mistakes are not understanding what the company does. I've heard that a lot more than you would expect or you would hope. I hear that a lot. So that's definitely a big one. And one of the challenges, like with the co-op programs, and other schools are similar in that you have a block amount of time to apply to jobs, and there's a stretched out interview period, and students are applying to like 50, 100, 200 jobs sometimes, and so it's way more quantity than quality. Quality is kind of out the window. So I think that's kind of the outcome of applying to so many jobs, is that you're not familiar with a lot of or most of the companies you're applying to, but that doesn't excuse. I have an interview in 3 days. I'm going to better have a look, see it, and see what this company does, and just get a feel and understanding at least at a basic level what I'm getting myself into. So that's the biggest one. And I have notes on interviews. I have to have notes or else I lose my thoughts. But review the job description, get an understanding of the company. And if we're talking the co-op world, as I just said, quality over quantity is so important. The blanket shootouts, 100 applications. While it makes sense why you would want to do that, especially as a junior student with no experience, it really take the time to get as many quality applications out the door as you can.
Definitely.
So, and also, what I normally tell my students is that if you've got an interview, 99%. I'll pull this number out of the air again, but 99% of the time, they think they think you can do the job. You know, you may have already done a technical interview if it's required. They assume that you can do the job already. So it's really about them getting a sense of who you are. So, you know, be confident in the fact that, you know, I can do this job. They think I can do this job. Coming into this interview, I just got to be myself, be the best person I can be, and the chips will lay as they may. You know, if they don't feel it's a good fit, then it's probably not a good fit for me either. So I think, I feel and I hope that helps students going into interviews kind of be a little more relaxed, because being prepared and relaxed in the interview goes a lot further, helps you go a lot further.
For sure. And that's great advice for anyone interviewing for any job, really. Yeah, you're exactly right. If you make it to the interview stage, whether you've already had your technical interview or not, you know, it's assumed that you can do it. You were assessed as qualified, however they did their preliminary screening. Yeah. And so you just like own that assumption, I guess, even if you aren't that qualified. I hate to use the term fake it till you make it, because that's not exactly what it is. Yeah, really, you know, step into that persona as a competent professional, and that will be much more convincing in the actual interview. And also, to your point, the whole like quality over quantity in terms of actual job applications is a really great point. I don't know if we've ever talked about the spray and pray method.
Yes.
So, you know, spraying and praying is just like treating job searching as a numbers game and just like spraying your resume all over the place and hoping that something connects. You know, I do get why students might approach it that way. Working professionals absolutely should not, because you know, you should have a targeted idea of what you're going after, and it's just you're gonna frustrate yourself thinking that, oh well, I applied to 100 jobs, I should at least have, I don't know, 10 interviews, let's say, if you're using some arbitrary stat. So anyway, good points all around. Actually, to that, what we were talking about in terms of sending a lot of applications, thinking that's the solution if you don't have any experience, we did get a question about what to do if you lack experience from Natalie. So I'm a senior in college and I was not able to obtain an internship over the summer. Do you have advice for how to apply for full-time jobs without prior work experience?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly if you're doing any volunteer, it really depends on your background. If you're a programmer or whatever, maybe you have a GitHub and you're doing all these other kinds of projects, or you're in engineering and you're tinkering with things. You know, these are things that employers love. They love people who are tinkering and doing things on their own. But you know, if not, that, you know, it can also apply for, you know, pretty much anybody else. If you, again, volunteering, some of the things we spoke about earlier, if you know, some of your interests, activities and interests that you do on your own time that kind of show a lot of the soft skills that are important to every employer, you know, kind of highlighting some of those and the certifications you did. You know, sometimes my students will highlight projects that they did, you know, in their academic time, or, you know, maybe a capstone project, as you mentioned you're senior, a capstone or whatever. It's something similar in the US. You know, it could be something like that. The important thing, if you're highlighting projects and things you're doing through schoolwork, is, you know, really make it speak to what you're after in the job and what sets you apart, because, you know, it's assumed you're in a class with 100 other students doing the same thing. What makes what you're doing different, or, you know, more, I don't want to say special, but more impactful than they are, and what are you bringing to the employer? So yeah, highlight some of those will help, I think.
Awesome advice. And Natalie followed up and said she was a product industrial designer. So
okay, great. So that's, you know, a lot of things you can highlight and, you know, link to, you know, if you have anything on any online presence for what you're doing, what you've done. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, you mentioned GitHub, which is something I continuously forget about, but I shouldn't. But yeah, GitHub that's an important thing for anyone in a technical space that might be doing. That's where you highlight your programming, right? Like any programming project. So you've got that, and or you could build your own portfolio online. And I love how you mentioned about tinkering, that employers love the tinkering. I think that we kind of discount our own kind of self-directed work because we think, oh, I'm just a hobbyist, or I'm just kind of playing around. But it's real world work, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and these are skills you're developing. It just, you may not be getting paid for it. It may be for fun, but that's also shows you're passionate and engaged in it. And these are the passions and things that you've learned and you've developed that you'll bring to the employer.
Yeah, absolutely. And also going back to Zubair's question about making a transition, that's another way really to make that transition, is to experiment and do some kind of self-directed projects. And showcase that you've already kind of taken the bull by the horn, so to speak, and kind of dove in and did some real world work in the area in which you want to transition. So that's great. Great questions. Keep them coming, guys. It looks like we have one more, but before I get to it, I want to ask you about, so we get into co-op, doing a great job. What can co-op students do to really retain the relationships that they build during their co-op?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we're speaking a lot about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, of course, connect with the people you're working with, and with co-op in particular, and internships, and other practicums, in general, it's your academic credit. It's your academic experience, even though you're working and getting paid. Employers know this. Employers, the vast majority of employers, are very much invested in your learning and development. They want you to have good experience and get involved while you're there. And likewise, as you move into the future, you may never go back to that company ever again. But if you've done a good job, made a good impression, they'll continue to be invested in your development as you go through. So, and I meet with employers a lot, and they always mention those students they had, 10 terms ago, who, just shot me an email. They shoot me an email every, 3 or 4 months, just an update on, hey, hey, how are you doing? Hope you may, how are the kids, or how's the job, or how's the team? I'm just finished my last year. I just finished a job at this company. It was really cool. I'm looking for my full-time job, hopefully in this. Or it may be earlier in their. It may not be that they're coming up on graduation, but they just keep that relationship and those touch points. And employers love that, and they're invested. So come down the lines, you're coming up to graduation, look for your full-time job, or you're even 5-10 years into your career, and you've kept contact with these people. They will help you. If they can't get you a job within their organization, they have their own connections. They can refer you. Happy to refer you to this person and that person. So it's really, again, the long game. And with LinkedIn, it's so easy to keep in touch. With email, it's so easy to just shoot. You can copy, you can pretty much copy and paste your email. I wouldn't really recommend copy and paste it. You want to target. These are good connections you want to keep alive, and so tailor it to each person. But take 5 minutes and send an email every 3 or 4 months, and you'll keep a connection, and it may pay out for you down the line.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the whole copy paste thing, a templated approach to emails, I think is okay. But as you said, customize it for each person. But I mean, if say someone is sending an update, and just kind of trying to keep that relationship warm, using that same bit about themselves, where they customize anything that's written towards the recipient. That should be customized. So
yeah.
Yes,
exactly. Thank you.
I know that's what the audience understood as well. So excellent. So we have a question from Rosemary. I'm an international student with work experience. I've been applying for full-time jobs with the hope that I can use the probation as my work co-op. Oh, interesting. I guess the 3-month probation. Is this correct?
Okay. I'm not quite sure what you mean by probation.
Okay. Can you clarify, Rosemary, what you mean by probation? Yeah, I'm curious about that one. So probation is like typically 3 months on the job, like work probation, but I don't know that that's necessarily what she's referring to. So we'll get her to clarify first. Yeah. Okay, your background's in cybersecurity. That's great, Rosemary. But what do you mean by probation, Rosemary? Can you put that in the chat? So yeah, actually, this brings up a good point that an area I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, at your university, you have a lot of international students. Mm-hmm. Do they need any different kind of permits to go through with a co-op work term?
Yeah. So yeah, they need a work permit. In addition, so if they're on co-op, they have their study permits, but they also require a work permit to do a co-op, to work, paid or unpaid, in Canada.
Right.
So that's a challenge for the new students, like the first year students coming in, because there's such a tremendous backlog in getting these documents processed. But yes, you do need a work permit.
So when does that process usually start then? They must have to start way early.
Yeah, it usually starts like in the first weeks of their first semester on campus. That starts getting processed, and under normal circumstances, it takes, I think, around 6 months on average. But now it's taking quite a bit longer. So there's concerns around that. But
right,
we're at the mercy of the federal government and
right,
how fast they can process things with everybody working remote and not having access to some of the secure servers that they need access to.
That's right.
So
quite complicated. And then in a pre-COVID era, for any of the students going down to the US who are, say, Canadian or international, they have to get their US visas, I guess, or? Yeah.
So yeah, same thing. Yeah, you have to get a visa. And those generally would take 6 to 8 weeks for a Canadian, and for most international students as well, it would take around 6 to 8 weeks for them to get that visa.
Got it.
To work in the US. Generally students go down on a cultural exchange visa.
Okay.
So it's a requirement of the company that they're working for, that there be cultural things as part of their experience. So it can be something to go on a ski trip or go to a baseball, go to a Red Sox game or whatever.
That would be very cultural as far as the US is concerned, right?
For sure.
Okay, that's great. So we have some clarification from Rosemary here. I'm trying to get a work co-op. Don't companies in Canada require probation periods before they hire you permanently? Okay, so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I think if we're talking a co-op, there's not a probation co-op or probation period with co-op jobs typically, because it's part of your academic program and you're only there 4 months. So you're, I guess, essentially on probation for the entire 3 or 4 months that you're there. But if you're talking, full time after graduation, a lot of companies do have a 3-month probation period where they can let you go easily, should it not be a good fit. But generally if they've got to that stage and they brought you in, that probation, they're not going to cut you out during the probation period unless the company has to downsize suddenly, or or you do something like extremely horrible, which I wouldn't imagine you would, but not knowing you, but
yeah. Well,
but,
her background's cybersecurity, so she
Oh
definitely.
yes, yes, yes. You have a lot of responsibility there.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. So that's let us know if you have any follow-up questions, Rosemary. All right. Zubair has another question. Let's grab this here. So, interviews during the current situation are taking much longer than they usually do, right? Sometimes spanning over weeks. Any advice for following up with recruiters or hiring managers while waiting? He also followed up to say there's a long gap between each round of interviews is his experience right now. So any advice for following up?
Yeah, I would. Well, yeah, certainly things are more drawn out because people aren't generally in the office together and can't discuss as easily as they normally would on this. And also, coming over the summer, people still are. Well, they're at least taking the time off. They may not be going on vacation, but I would say make a habit of asking in the interview when you might expect roughly. I mean, when you will hear or not, about the outcome, and in that case, if you haven't heard, if they say in 2 weeks and you haven't heard in 2 weeks, then I think it's perfectly fine to shoot them an email, or email usually. If you don't know and it's been a couple of weeks, I think it's perfectly fine to send just a follow-up email. Say I've still very interested and available. Has there been any decision made on this position, and see what that is. I think the important thing is not to be hounding them like phone and voicemail, and then follow up with an email, and then an email like 2 days later. Just realize, as stressful it is for you, the job seeker, you have to also be aware that there's a lots of moving parts in the background, and a lot of one person generally can't make the decision on these things, and so it takes time. But sending those messages is perfectly fine.
I totally.
I would say 2 weeks.
Yeah. Sorry.
I would say 2 weeks generally at the most.
Yeah.
During these times, if pre-COVID, I would say maybe a little sooner, but it really depends, I think.
Yeah, I think it really does depend, and but I think follow-up is so important and for staying top of mind. But as you say, you kind of want to strike that balance between staying top of mind and becoming a stalker, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little tough to strike that fine balance. But I find that when following up, especially now in our COVID era, is expressing empathy even in the message, the follow-up message. Like, I know, like, these times are really difficult, and that I have that decisions can't be made easily or as easily as before, and then to kind of mention again why you're a great fit for the role. And yeah, I think the empathy and patience are really, really important, especially now. So
yeah, indeed.
yeah, it's hard though, especially when we need a paying job. So yeah, it's tough. All right. Are there any other questions that anybody had for Luke? You've been so helpful tonight, Luke, and your insights have been so valuable. And if anyone wants to connect with you, they can find you on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's the best. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. And I've put a link to your profile in the description of this video, so people can grab it there. Yeah, so I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so I'm gonna release Luke. because it is almost 9 o'clock. So thank you again so much for spending your evening with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that everyone tuning in really appreciates it as well. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Luke.
I'm very happy to do it, and thanks for having me, and thanks for the great questions, everybody, and for those of you tuning in as well. Yeah, it's been fun, and I wish everybody the best in their job search. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you
a lot,
so much.
Kamara.
All right. Thanks a lot, Luke. Thanks, everybody. And everybody have a great night. We'll see you next Thursday. Take care.